I thought it was about time that I did something really helpful and did the research required to tell you exactly, step by step, how to submit your show to every conceivable place you can in order to increase your podcast reach. I'm talking about Podcast Directories, people, on this episode of Podcastification. My name is Kerry Green, and I am the client happiness guy at podcastfasttrack.com, and this is Podcastification. This show is all about podcasting. How to do it, how not to do it, best practices, interesting news items that have to do with the realm of podcasting, and who knows what else. And I'm trying to do it all with a little bit of fun and some information to help you get a show going, keep yours going, or make it better. And if you like what's going on here on the show, I would appreciate it, oh so appreciate it, if you could leave a rating or review on iTunes. You can find out how to do that at podcastfasttrack.com/review. That's enough of that kind of stuff. Let's get you podcastificated right away. Okay, it's possible that I led you down the garden path there for just a moment because I'm not going to really show you every conceivable place that you could list your podcast because there's a problem with that. Every conceivable place is not always the best place, in my humble opinion. Now, why would I even say such a thing? Well, I have two reasons. Number one, there's many options that require you to use their particular hosting or advertising or app or whatever thingy-mabobber they're hawking in order to be in their directory. So unless you're specifically looking for those kinds of opportunities, they're not really that much use to you. As a result, I'm not including those in my list. Secondly, some of the directories out there don't appear to be really very well done, which in my mind means it's likely not truly going to be advantageous for your show to be in them. So, this episode is a walkthrough of the many podcast directory-ish places that you can list your show that I have deemed are worth the time of doing so. And it's my show. I can do it if I want to. You know, one thing I should probably also say is that the list and instructions I'm about to share do not contain sites that pull directly from the Apple Podcasts, formerly iTunes, directory. Why? Well, because if you submit to Apple Podcasts, you'll automatically be included in those directories or apps, which includes most of the iOS or Android apps that are out there. And be it known, I have done exactly what I'm telling you to do with all three of my own personal podcasts. And I'm going to be referring back to this episode myself to submit any future podcasts that I publish. And one last thing before we get too far into this, you can find every directory that I mention, yes, every one, and the links and step-by-step processes needed in order to get your great podcast into those directories. Can you guess where? On the show notes page for this particular episode. And you can find that list at podcastfasttrack.com/79. But it's also included in the description section of your podcast app or player. So if you're listening on one of those, swipe left, right, up, down, stand on your head, whatever you have to do to find that list. And it's going to be there in its entirety as much as I have control over. Because, some of those app developers, they just, they limit the characters. And, I think that's kind of discrimination against characters, because, I've had some pretty fun characters in my life. And another thing. These lists of directories are in alphabetical order for your sorting convenience. Well, that's enough of that kind of stuff. Let's get to the directories. All right, first directory that I want to tell you about is called Acast, A-C-A-S-T. Acast is a new app that claims to help podcasters with discovery issues, which is debated hotly in the podcasting circles, but regardless, it's a pretty cool and a pretty functional app. Acast includes 3 targets: listeners, podcasters, and advertisers. And it does include a hosting option for podcasters who are looking for something a little bit different. You can discover more about Acast at podcast.directories.acast.com. Now, there are two ways to add your podcast to the Acast directory. So you're going to have to decide which you want to do. The first is the one that I did. It's the non-hosted option. And when you do that, you provide the Acast folks with your RSS feed, and they'll make your show searchable and listenable on their app platform. This means no monetization and no hosting for you. That's what I wanted because I host somewhere else. But the hosted option, in this scenario, this is where Acast becomes your media host. And yes, if you want to use it in that way, you'd have to leave your current host in order to do that. When you do this option, Acast will provide opportunities for you to monetize your show with ads or sponsorships, and you'll have access to the Acast publishing tool and their stats. So, if Acast sounds like a place you'd like to list your podcast, or potentially a partner you might connect with for hosting or monetization, you can submit to the Acast directory this way. You're going to go to acast.com and you're going to scroll down to the Add Your Show option near the bottom of the page. Then you get to choose your own adventure. You can decide non-hosted or hosted with a brand new show. And I'm not exactly sure why they would have that. If you're clicking hosted, maybe the other one's in case you're already hosted there. But anyway, you're going to give them the info they request, hit the send button, and then scroll up on the resulting page to see the confirmation message. That's Acast. That wasn't too painful, was it? All right, the next directory that I'm going to tell you about is Apple Podcasts, which was formerly iTunes. If you didn't know that, iTunes is rebranding themselves. And so they actually have artwork requirements and things like that. If you're going to say, listen to our show on iTunes, you're now supposed to say, listen on Apple Podcasts. And they have artwork and all that stuff that you have to be very specific about. So check that out. Find that online if you need help with that. But as you know, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, is the big dog, 500-pound gorilla place to be when it comes to podcast search. It's one you definitely want to put high on your priority list. Many people, including Rob Walsh of Libsyn fame and a previous guest on my show in 3 specific places, which you can find in the show notes at podcastfasttrack.com/79, say that if your show is not in the Apple Podcast directory, you're really not podcasting. Now, I don't know about that, but I do know that if Apple Podcasts is not on your radar, you've got the wrong radar. So, to get into the directory for Apple Podcasts, here's how. Before you submit, there are some things you need to know about submitting. Your show needs to have at least 1 episode published and live on your feed. Your cover art needs to meet the minimum 1400 pixel by 1400 pixel requirement. It has to be square. Can't even be 1 pixel off, or you can mess up that feed and it won't validate properly. And if your cover art is over 500 kilobytes in size, you're likely going to have problems. You can reduce the size by using a free online tool. I have included one in the show notes for this episode. So to submit to Apple Podcasts, you're going to go to a website called Podcasts Connect, and you can find it at podcastsconnect.apple.com. Notice it's plural there, podcastsconnect.apple.com. And when you do, you should click on the plus sign at the top of the dashboard. You're going to enter your RSS feed URL into the field provided and click the validate button. If your feed is okay, meaning if it comes back with no errors, a feed preview is going to appear for you. And then you can click the submit button. Now, it typically takes the folks at Apple 6 hours to 48-ish hours to respond via email to let you know that your show has been approved. And the process for submitting a podcast to Apple Podcasts changed in the last year or so, and it's now October of 2017, so it's good that I didn't teach you how to do this prior to that change. All right, let's go on to another podcast directory. This one is called audio-podcast.fm. They have no super cutesy logo to represent themselves, just a generic title at the top of the page, but the claims made on the homepage are pretty impressive. They say you can download from over 6.5 million audio podcast episodes. Wow. Choose from over 88,000 podcasts in one of the largest audio podcast directories worldwide. Now, I'm not exactly sure how to go about verifying that kind of a claim. I guess I'll just have to take their word for it. And I'm also not absolutely sure, but I suspect this directory does not pull from Apple Podcasts. The reason I think that is because I did a little experiment with my 3 podcasts. All 3 of my podcasts are listed in Apple Podcasts. So I just simply searched for each of them in turn on audio-podcast.fm, and none of them came back in the search results. So, as I said, I decided to submit them. Here's how you can submit your show to audio-podcast.fm. If you go to the home page at audio-podcast.fm, you have to scroll way to the bottom of the page and find the tiny little text link at the bottom. But if you use the link I provided in the title above on the show notes page, you'll go right to the submission page. And here's what you do. You paste in your RSS feed URL. You choose 3 categories that fit your show, and I encourage you to be accurate on that so you don't tick anybody off. Speaking of tick, you're going to tick the box that says you're the producer and have read and agree with the terms and conditions, and I dare you to actually read them. You'll provide your contact email address. You'll enter the infamously troublesome CAPTCHA code and click the green Submit Your Podcast button. Then you're going to be taken to a greenish-looking page that promises your show will be reviewed within 24 hours. This site will also give you the opportunity to embed an icon on your website that links to your podcast on their directory. Now, that's a clever way to get backlinks from a reputable website like yours, don't you think? Let's move on. The next directory is the Blueberry Podcast Directory. Now, I always say Blueberry because they have no E's in their name. I don't know what it is about discrimination against vowels, but instead of saying blueberry, it just feels like I need to say blueberry. So that's what I say. Now, the good folks at Blueberry are most widely known for their podcast hosting services and the PowerPress plugin used on many WordPress sites. However, they also have a pretty impressive podcast directory. And here's what they actually say about it. The creators of Blueberry are podcasters as well and recognize the importance of other podcast directories, including iTunes. Blueberry Podcast Directory does not try to compete with other directories. Our main goal is to offer additional distribution points that otherwise are not available to podcasters. With this philosophy, we believe the Blueberry Podcast Directory fills the void where iTunes and podcasting is otherwise unavailable. Did you notice that one section about additional distribution points that aren't usually available to podcasters? That is why the Blueberry directory is significant in my mind. Some of the places that directory can list your show are Roku TV, Google TV, Android, Samsung Smart TV. Those are just a few examples. So if you're as interested in that as I am, how do you get your show into the Blueberry Podcast Directory? I'm so glad you asked. What you're going to do is you're going to create an account on the Blueberry platform. You'll do that at Blueberry. Now remember, there's no E's, so BLUBRRY.com/createaccount.php. And once you go there and submit your account, you will add your podcast at the following link, Blueberry, remember, no E's, BLUBRRY.com/addpodcast.php. And when you do that, you're going to be asked for your RSS feed URL. You'll be asked to create a web-friendly name for your show. For this show, I just chose Podcastification. And then you'll be asked to choose one category for your show. And you'll have to agree to the terms and conditions. Again, I dare you to read them. Then you can hit the blue Submit button. It's not too difficult, and that can get your podcast into TV boxes and the like, so it's well worth the effort. Let's move on to another podcasting directory. All right, this next one is all one word. It's called Double Twist. Double Twist with a lowercase d and a capital T. Interesting branding. This one actually is not exactly a podcasting app or directory. It's a media player. But it pulls from its own directory to play those things, make them available on their media player. So you can submit so that people who use it can easily find your podcast. I have long been recommending to people that they submit to Double Twist. I just think it's an extra way for you to get your show out there. And the process is actually quite easy. So here's how you submit your show to Double Twist. You are going to go to doubletwist.com/contact. Then you're going to enter your name. You're going to enter your email address. And in the drop down for subject, you get to choose Request New Podcast. Then you'll have the option to enter the title of your podcast, enter the CAPTCHA stuff, and then hit the blue Submit button. And you'll get a message that says, "Your message has been received. Thanks for your interest. One of our Jedis will use the Force to push this podcast to our universe. Thank you for helping us improve Double Twist. Greetings from Austin, Texas, the Double Twist team." They seriously have Jedis working for them? That is way cool. All right, the next directory you should submit your show to is Google Play Music. Now, after a very long time of not supporting or listing podcasts very effectively, Google Play Music is finally on board with podcasting. Sort of. The Google Play Music app still lacks much when it comes to being good for podcast search and use, and that's as of October of 2017. But I'm hopeful that Google, being the tech giant that they are, will get their act together and get the importance of podcasting and finally create something native to Android that works for podcasts. Maybe a rework of Google Play Music, maybe something new. I don't care. Just do something, Google. So, if you're ready to submit your show to Google Play Music, I think that's a splendid idea. Here's how you do it. You're going to go, first of all, to accounts.google.com/signup. And once you do that, you will go to the Google Play Music podcast page, which is at play.google.com/music/podcasts/publish. Remember, all these links are going to be in the show notes on your little fancy-dancy player there. Then you're going to click the orange Publish button. Then you will click on the blue Add a Podcast button. And then you'll just simply supply your information, including your RSS feed URL and all the requested info. Now, a brief word of caution on this one. Rob Walsh, a podcaster relations guy at Libsyn, says that he wouldn't be surprised if someday Google and Apple go toe-to-toe and make it hard for one of those companies to use the other's stuff on their platform. And in this sense, what he's talking about is iTunes might start pushing its weight around and, make it hard to submit the same feed to Google Play that you do to Apple and stuff like that. And it's not an inconceivable thought, since Apple's already kind of proprietary in the things it does. I mean, just try to charge an iPhone with a non-iPhone charging cord to see what I mean. So for that reason, the good folks at Libsyn have devised a way that users of their dashboard can create a Google Play Music only feed. So you can submit to Google Play Music in a way that won't be influenced in any way by the big Apple gorilla, should it decide to throw its weight around as regards your podcast feed. If you're a Libsyn user, just go to the Destinations tab in your dashboard and create a new one, and you'll see the button for Google Play Music. Click it and do the dance that you have to do to get all that stuff filled in, and the result will be a new RSS feed URL that you can submit directly to Google Play, just as I've instructed you. Okay, the next directory is iHeartRadio. iHeartRadio, you've probably heard of iHeart. They're becoming more and more prevalent out there. iHeartRadio is a podcasting app and so much more. It's actually, as the name implies, a way to stream internet radio of all kinds, even including events of various sorts. Now, here's the scoop on iHeartRadio. You can't submit your show to it directly, and it does not pull from the Apple Podcast ecosystem. So how do you get into iHeartRadio? Well, you have to have a relationship with someone or some company who can get you into iHeartRadio. And at this point, this is October of 2017, I only know of two options. The first one is Libsyn. If you are a Libsyn user, you're in. Almost. Your show has to be regularly publishing for at least 2 months before you're eligible to be submitted to iHeartRadio. You also have to be using the Libsyn destination feed functionality in order to make it work. So no download only option and all that kind of stuff. You have to be using their publishing tools the way that they're designed to function. And then once you've been publishing long enough for that 2 months, you will see iHeartRadio pop up as an option in your Destinations tab. Then you'll have to click the Add button and jump through the hoops. You can watch Crystal's great tutorial on how to do that in a video on my show notes page. Now, I don't think the video will actually be in the description on the podcasting apps, but I will include a link. So you can just go right there and see Crystal's great tutorial, and it'll show you how to jump through every single hoop you have to jump through. Now, I mentioned there is a second way to get yourself into iHeartRadio, and that is through Spreaker. Now, I have to say right up front that I'm not a Spreaker customer, and I don't use Spreaker. And so the following information could be just a bit wonky. But after researching things, this is what I understand you need to do in order to submit to iHeartRadio through Spreaker. See, I didn't have to do this myself because my shows are on Libsyn. So you're going to go to Spreaker.com and create your show. So you have to be hosted on Spreaker. And from your show's settings, you go to their content management system, which is at Spreaker.com/CMS/shows. Then you're going to choose your show and click the yellow edit button. You'll select iHeart in the menu that appears on the left and click the submit button. After clicking it, you'll be asked to accept the terms and conditions. Read them, I dare you, and then submit your show to iHeartRadio. And if you're a visual type person, they do have a screen capture style tutorial of how to do it that I'm going to include in the show notes for this episode, podcastfasttrack.com/79, or check out your description on your podcast playing app. So that is how to use your connections to get into iHeartRadio. All right, now pay attention on this one. This directory is called Listen, L-I-S-N. So listen, no T-E in there. This is a pretty interesting directory. It's been described by some as a podcast directory that met Pinterest. Interesting indeed. And from first glance, it has a ton of well-known and popular shows in the directory. See, I didn't even know about this one until I began researching. And after I've submitted all three of my shows, the submission process really couldn't be any simpler. So to submit your podcast to Listen, you're going to go to listen, LISN.cc. And you're going to click on the top right-hand little hamburger menu, the three little bars that you see up there. Then you're going to choose the upload option. Then in the big black field that says paste URL here, guess what you're going to do? You're going to paste your RSS feed URL there. Then you're going to click on the upload cloud icon below the field. And you should see a green text success thingy bobber that tells you to wait 12 to 24 hours for your show to appear. And that's it. Listen, that was pretty easy. Okay, the next one is called Listen Notes. And in this one, the word listen is actually spelled out. L-A-S-T-E-N notes. Now, I checked out the Listen Notes page during October, and so the site had this cute little pumpkin in the middle of its logo. Funny, it kind of reminds me of stuff Libsyn does on their login page around the holidays. Anyway, Listen Notes is a fairly new podcast search engine, and it claims to be, and this from their webpage says, like Google, but for podcasts. Interesting. The story behind it is a self-funded software engineer from San Francisco named Wenmin Fang created this directory, and it appears to be working fairly well. The site touts over 380,000 podcasts listed as of October of 2017. So it seemed beneficial to me to get listed in the directory. Who knows? It could become my number one means of being discovered. And so, how do you get your podcast listed in the Listen Notes directory? Well, first of all, you're going to go to listennotes.com. So you're going to have two N's right together there in the middle, one of them at the end of Listen and one at the beginning of Notes. You're going to choose the Submit option, which is way down at the bottom of the page. And then once the page opens, add your iTunes URL for the podcast you want to submit. iTunes URL. It's not your feed address. You'll have to open up iTunes or find your podcast on iTunes on the internet. And when you find the cover art, hover your mouse over the cover art, right click and say copy link. That's how you get the link to your iTunes URL. So you're going to use the iTunes URL for the podcast you want to submit. And then you're going to, I would say, be sure to copy over the HTTP:// that's already there in the field, because if you don't, you're going to have two http:// in your HTTP address, and you don't want that because it's going to cause problems. Once you've done that, you're going to enter your email address if you want to be notified when your podcast is added to the directory, and then you'll click the bluish greenish submit button. That's it. That's all you got to do to get into Listen Notes. Next one I would suggest that you get involved with is Player FM. Now, not really get involved with, but, get your show published in. Player FM is a multi-platform app for podcasting that even works offline. You can connect it to your TV. You can access its curated catalog, and I'm not exactly sure how it's curated, to find niche topics and interesting stuff. And the app costs nothing. Zilch, nada, with no ads. So people are using this thing, and you should be in there so that they can find you more easily. Now, there is an upgrade, but with a free app this good, there's already tons of subscribers. But you're a podcaster, so it would be great for you to get your show in front of all those subscribers. Here's how the submission process for Player FM works. You go to player.fm/importer/new. You're going to enter your RSS feed URL into the great big box, and then you're going to hit the import button. Man, that's the easiest thing I've done all day. That's seriously it. That's all you do to get involved with Player FM. And I keep saying get involved with Player FM. Maybe there's some subliminal thing going on in my brain. Okay, the next one is the Podbean directory. Now, if you don't know about Podbean, you're in for a treat. I've met a person or two who works over there at various conferences, and they're doing some great things for the podcastosphere. Podbean is a podcast publishing service. They offer both free and pay-for podcast publishing packages. So if you're in the market for free, go check them out. Just keep in mind, free means there are things you might want that you won't get in the free package. Just keep that in mind. Now, like any podcasting service or media host, Podbean offers publishing tools, stats, and a lot more, but they also have their own directory, which anyone can get into. You don't have to be a Podbean customer. Now, the benefit is that anyone who uses the Podbean app, which is a pretty spiffy looking app, by the way, would then have access to the shows that are submitted there, even though they're not hosted with Podbean. Sounds smart to me. And it's not that difficult. So here's how you get your show listed in the Podbean directory. You're going to go to podbean.com/site, SITE/submit podcast. And you are going to create a username for yourself. That page should redirect you to the submission page. And then you're going to enter your RSS feed URL in the space provided. And again, be sure to remove the HTTPS stuff if you're going to paste in a URL. And then your show is included immediately. Yes, I mean immediately. I did one of my shows and it was like it takes you to the page where your show is suddenly included and you see all your episodes there and everything. It's actually pretty stinking cool. Wow. These Podbean folks aren't playing around, are they? All right, the next one is called Podcast Blaster. And as far as I can tell, the Podcast Blaster site has been around for a while. I mean, their last blog post was published in 2007. So that's a sign of longevity. I'm not sure what it says for their ability to keep up with the times. But anyway, I debated about whether to include Podcast Blaster in this list for that very reason. So I decided to peruse the site a bit. And what made me decide to include Podcast Blaster was two things. Number one, submitting a podcast is easy, immediate, and trouble-free once you figure out how to do it. But number two, the site says they're now tracking 4,630 podcasts and 180,354 episodes. Now, that's not a ton, but if you could become 4,631 in that podcast list, why not? Some people are using it, it seems. So I don't know if any of that's true. I just know it's a number that got my attention, so I thought I'd include Podcast Blaster just in case. It is true, and it is being updated. So here's how to get it listed in the Podcast Blaster directory. You are going to go to this URL, podcastblaster.com/directory/add-podcasts. And then you will paste your RSS feed URL into the field where it says add podcast feed to directory. Then you're going to hit the add podcast button and you're done. I mean, it was so easy. I did it 3 times. And when I clicked on the link that says latest podcasts, I saw all 3 of my podcasts, one right after another, as the latest ones added. I mean, heck, why not? Give it a try. At least something is being updated regularly. All right, the next thing I would say that you should do to submit yourself is to a place called Radio Public. It's all one word, Radio Public. It's both an app and a directory. And they claim to have over 250,000 podcasts listed. That's impressive. So it appears to me it's a decent place to get your show included. Now, I have nothing more to say about it than that. They have a pretty snazzy looking submission form that requires you to enter a lot of stuff that other forms don't. So, they are taking this kind of seriously, but, so it is. You have to take care of that if you're going to do it. So to submit your podcast to Radio Public, you're going to go to radiopublic.typeform.com/2TO/ here comes the letters TWMWSI. And remember, all these links are in the show notes for this episode at podcastfasttrack.com/79. Then you're going to enter the name of your podcast. You're going to enter your email address. You're going to enter your RSS feed URL. And again, I would suggest you copy over the HTTP stuff. Then the form's going to ask for the link to your podcast in iTunes, which is now Apple Podcasts. Now, that could be a problem for you if you don't know how to do it. So I'm including in the show notes how to go about that. You search for your podcast in iTunes, you hover over the cover art image and right click. I have an image in the show notes if you need to see it. And you copy that link. So back to the submission instructions. You're going to paste in your iTunes link. You're going to type in your website address. If you don't have a website, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe it'll blow up. Then you're going to answer the question about the best way to order your episodes. That's really interesting. They're asking, do you want them latest to first or first to latest? Which way do you want? Ascending or descending? Interesting. And then you're going to hit the submit button. That's it. It's a bit long and belabored, but worth it, I think. Okay, next on my list, you can submit your podcast to Spreaker, even if you aren't a Spreaker user. Now, Spreaker's doing some very interesting things in the podcasting space, including a pretty cool desktop and mobile app for recording that's called Spreaker Studio. I mean, it's pretty impressive. I have a link to it in the show notes if you want to check it out. And typically, if you want to be included in the shows listed in the Spreaker app, you would need to be a Spreaker customer. But I know a way you can get in the Spreaker directory. If you look back on one of my podcast episodes in the past, that was, the one called How to Stay Encouraged on Your Podcasting Journey. I'm not exactly sure what episode that was. What was it? It was episode number 64. I had Rob Greenlee from Spreaker. He's a podcasting veteran. He was podcasting before podcasting was even a thing. Seriously. If you don't believe me, go back and listen to that episode. But he now works for Spreaker as head of content. And he told me he'd be willing to do some additions to their directory to be listed in their Android and iOS Spreaker apps. And he calls this a pass-through submission. So here's how to submit your podcast to Spreaker as a pass-through submission. You're going to send a very kind email to my friend Rob at rob.greenlee, and that's the color green, Lee, at Spreaker, Spreaker.com, and ask him to kindly include your podcast in the Spreaker directory as a pass-through submission. And you'll want to include your RSS feed URL. That's it. If Rob gets back to you and says he's not doing that anymore, hey, my disclaimer is I didn't know that, but, Rob's a peach of a guy. I'm sure he'll help you out if he can. So get yourself into Spreaker. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is submitting your show to Spotify. Did you know that's even possible? Spotify is indeed allowing individual podcasters to submit their shows for possible inclusion. Now, let me say something right off the bat here. It's possible, but you have to be patient, and it's not guaranteed. And you'd be absolutely right to think that it would be a good thing to get your podcast into the Spotify directory of audio resources, because it is a big player when it comes to streaming audio. As of 2016, Spotify accounted for 40% of all streaming audio subscription. Man, that's a big bite of the pie. So you tell me, do you want your show to be listed in Spotify? That's what I thought. Now I need to pause right here and give a word of thanks to Todd Cochran. Todd Cochran is CEO over at Raw Voice, which is the parent company of Blueberry. And he made me aware via social media that Spotify has a way for podcasters like you and me to submit their shows directly to Spotify for consideration. So thank you, Todd. It's a great resource. You're a peach. So let's talk about submitting your show to Spotify. Before we get too far into it, you need to know this catch. Well, it's not quite a catch. It's more of a caveat. Unlike the other directories or services, the powers that be at Spotify make it very clear right up front that you can submit your show to them, but that your submission doesn't guarantee that your show will indeed be chosen for inclusion in the Spotify directory. In fact, from what I hear from other people in the podcast space, very few shows, at least at this point, October 2016, are actually being included in Spotify. You have to have higher numbers and those kinds of things. But I don't think, it's just my gut feel here. I don't think it's always going to be that way. So I would suggest that it is a good idea for you to try to get into Spotify. So here's how to do it. You're going to go to a web link, which is in the show notes for this episode. It is so stinking long and convoluted, I'm not even going to try to read it. And that's because it's a Google Doc. It's very interesting, a Google form, rather. I don't recall any other submission process being done with a Google form, so that's quite interesting. But anyway, you can find the web link in the show notes at podcastfasttrack.com/79. And you'll notice right away, Spotify makes it clear about the submission thing, not guaranteeing you'll be included. Now, the cool thing about this submission process is that you can submit more than one podcast at a time, which is cool. I submitted all 3 of mine on one form. They have a field there that asks you, how many podcasts are you submitting? And you put in 3. And then in all the other fields, it'll ask you like for your RSS feed and the name of your show and all that kind of stuff. And you just put all 3 of them there in the same field. The form doesn't really tell you how to delineate them between each other, set them apart. So I separated mine with commas. That just kind of made sense to me. And so I did all of that. That's really all there is to it. You go through the whole form, you punch in the submit button. At the end, you have to agree to some terms, and there you go. You have submitted to Spotify and may or may not be included in the Spotify listing of audio resources. So that's it for that one. Let's move on to another. Okay, the next one is Stitcher. You've likely heard of Stitcher, and I think Stitcher is kind of a funny name for an app, but then again, we have Google and Yahoo and Bing and all these funny names out there. So maybe that's the way to go. Stitcher is likely, I'm guessing here, the main directory for Android devices, though it's available on iOS devices and PCs as well. They tout over 65,000 shows are available to stream on Stitcher. Now, Stitcher's process is a bit different and a lot the same. You'll have to first sign up to be what they call a content provider, and then follow a few additional steps. So to submit your podcast to Stitcher, you first want to sign up for that content provider thing. You're going to do that at stitcher.com/content-providers, plural, providers. And you'll scroll to the bottom to sign up. Once you're signed up, you'll need to go to the partner portal to submit your show. And that is at partners.stitcher.com/partneradfeed.php. And in the bluish form, you'll enter your show name. You'll enter your RSS feed URL. You will choose a language. You will choose a category. You will tell how many listeners you currently have. You'll include your Twitter handle. You'll include your Facebook page. And you'll enter your desired keywords. Then you'll tick the box to agree to the terms of use, which I challenge you to read. Then click the blue Continue button. A new window will pop up for you to review your submission. And then you should click the Submit Application button. Wow. If you do all that, you deserve to be in Stitcher. So go out there and do it. All right, the next one I'm going to highlight is called the Podcast Source. And this is actually Libsyn's podcast directory. Most of you know Libsyn as an amazing podcast host, but they also have their own directory that feeds their Libsyn app exclusively. Okay, here's the good news. If you are a Libsyn customer already, you can likely skip this step. but I suggest that you check to see if your show is included. One of my 3 shows hosted on Libsyn actually was not included yet. So you'll want to go to directory.libsyn, that's libsyn.com/shows/search and search for your show. If it's not listed there, you can still get into the directory. And even if you're not a Libsyn customer, you can. And it's well worth your time to be included. And that is some good news. So here is how you're going to go about submitting to the Podcast Source directory. You will go to the Podcast Source app submission page, which is at Libsyn, libsyn.com/podcast-source-submit. And again, all these fancy dancy links are in my show notes. Enter your RSS feed URL, enter your email address, and then click the green submit button. And you're all done. Now you can just wait eagerly for the email from the fabulous Libsyn team that tells you your show's now included in their app directory. Okay, the next one I would say that is worth your time is TuneIn. You may have heard of TuneIn. TuneIn is another of those apps that has tons of content, including audiobooks. I mean, it's becoming more and more popular from what I can tell, so it's worth the effort to make sure your show is included in their directory. And getting into the TuneIn directory takes a bit more form filling out a ring than I like, but it's the process they have in place, so you have to do it their way. Here's how to get your podcast listed in the TuneIn directory. You'll need to navigate to their contact page, which is at help.tunein.com/customer/portal/emails/new ? Bracket labels _new close bracket equal podcast and T equals 764630. It's in the show notes. Please, people, go to the show notes and get that one. You're going to enter your email address, your podcast title, your host name. I think that's your name as the host of the show. Enter your RSS feed URL. You'll enter your podcast logo at 1200 pixel by 1200 pixel. You'll enter a banner image if you want to have a banner image on their doodad, and it has to be 1224 pixel by 300 pixel. You'll select your country. You'll select your language. You'll enter your website address. You'll enter 3 genres. I'm not exactly sure what they want there, so I guessed. You'll enter your station email. So they call podcast stations, I guess. You'll enter your phone number. You'll enter your Twitter handle. You'll enter comments if you wish. Then you will tick the box to accept the terms. I dare you to read them. And click the blackish submit button. Wow. Just wow. Hello? Okay, so that is my list of podcast directories that I believe are worth getting into, all the way from A through T. Funny, there weren't many past T that seemed even worth it, so I didn't go there. So if you have any questions, please, 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 don't try to re-listen to this episode 17 times to write down a URL. Just go to the show notes at podcastfasttrack.com/79. And you'll have this entire thing listed there with cutesy little logos from the different apps and links and resources and all that kind of wonderful stuff. So that is it. Those are the 2017 podcast directories your show must be in. Now, you know what time it is. It's time for you to go out and make it a podcastificating day. This show is brought to you by Podcast Fast Track, where my team provides professional podcasting services without the time suck. Full production, editing, and show notes all in one monthly subscription package. You can find out more at podcastfasttrack.com. Now go out and make it a podcastificating day. Audio editing and show notes by podcastfasttrack.com. Get 15% off your first month by mentioning this show.